Well met, weary traveler. Come in and sit by the fire for a moment. Take up your flagon of ale or mead and lend your ear. Let us regale you with the tales of bygone adventure and the wisdom of ages. Or, just listen in while three dudes named Jeff, Chad, and Jeremy talk about role-playing games.
Speaking of movies, did you guys get a chance to see Justice League yet?
I have not. I haven't been in the movie theater in a long time.
Honestly, I've most of my feedback I've heard so far about it is that it was like pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it for certain things. I didn't like it for everything, but it sold me. It got my seat and got me to buy a ticket. So fair enough. At the end of the day, I sat through it and didn't walk out of the theater, so it must have been good enough to make it something.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to hear that it's kind of got that much of a wishy-washy reception from a lot of people.
Because
Wonder Woman.
Here's the thing:
good.
it's fabulous in certain parts, right? There are certain things that make it amazing, and then there are certain things that I'm like, y'all could have spent a bigger budget to do this thing, or man, if you had only done that thing. But then that's just me being like this mega comic book nerd that's like, you're not sticking to canon, you're gonna kill everything. Jesus,
I'm gonna draw a line in the sand here, and I'm gonna say, so it's kind of like DC overall.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's the way the DC handles their stuff.
I told you it was gonna be a line in this.
Jeremy firing shots over here.
And I'm a DC fanboy.
Right,
I am. I'm a DC fanboy, hardcore, and it hurts me. It like physically hurts me that I have to beg for fantastic movies, and then Wonder Woman happens, and I'm like, yes, finally things will happen. And then this comes out, and it's like, I really enjoyed it, but would I go back and watch it again at a movie theater with a friend? Probably not. That's the kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm not super crazy into the whole comic thing, at least the classic comic book stuff, the Marvel DC. But it's right. Even as an outsider, it's sad to me how much DC is getting trashed by Marvel in terms of just making decent stuff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And speaking of making decent stuff, I'm excited to see, Jeremy, I was excited to see that today you posted pictures of your playing space, and I think that's going to be awesome that you have a new environment to create stuff in. Absolutely. That's going to be crazy cool.
Looking forward to it, yeah. And may I just pause for a moment to point out the super icy cold Chad Knick slipping in with the segue there.
Oh, yeah.
That was just smooth, man.
That was Kevin
Sorbo smooth.
Oh, yeah.
This guy thinks he can just come into our podcast, segue on his own without it.
I'm going rogue, guys. I'm going rogue. It's happening right
his
now.
Claim already here.
Chad has assumed control.
You will assimilate with me, or you will just.
This was
my plan all
along. I'll inject myself into their ranks and then mastermind behind the scenes exactly to my specifications.
The world is mine.
Chad's got his sleeves rolled up. He's like, look, I didn't come to play, guys.
Guys, come on.
That's
now. Awesome. We can turn it into Chad plus the Dudes of Yore. No, we're that would be horrible. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
With
all these segues, you could almost say that Chad is going the extra mile.
Oh, yeah, I am going the extra mile.
Now we have pun segues?
It's
double
segue.
It's
getting bad, guys. Double segue.
Ultra
segue upon segue.
I think double segues are called cars.
Double segues. Oh, man. They are called cars. They're the hybrid cars because they run on electricity.
Joke. I'm allowed to make that joke. I'm a dad.
It's okay. You're making dad jokes all day long. It's good. Oh, man.
So, creating stuff.
Like
podcasts.
Podcasts and things.
Yeah. So now that we
I'm
totally
super excited
trashed
for
that
this.
segue,
Yeah.
hello everybody. Welcome to the Dudes of Yore. I'm Jeff, joined here by Jeremy, as well as our newest member, Chad. Super happy to have him along. If there was anybody I would have had as my third member.
Oh yeah, dude, I'm super happy to be with you guys and hanging out because it honestly, like when I walk, like I guess I can't say walked in because it's like it's an audio podcast.
Sure you
but
can. You virtually walked in.
No, like I virtually walked in, and I feel like as soon as I walked in the room, man, like this feels like I'm so happy because it fits like a glove, and it feels like we're just sitting in a room, like drinking and having fun and just relaxing and talking about things we love, and that's the great part about this thing. That's what I love about you guys. You guys get me on a level that I don't think a lot of other people do, which is fabulous.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that a little bit before you popped in. I was telling Jeff, it's kind of like AdCon.
Mm-hmm.
Or, the Fiasco game that we played afterwards.
100% agree with that, man.
Yeah, for sure.
100%.
Cool. So, yeah, we're talking about going the extra mile.
Yep.
It's kind of what the topic is about today. And it's about doing the extra things for your games. The things that are beyond what you need to do or, what has to be done. Things like making props or doing voices for your NPCs. Or even just going the extra mile as a player. Because you don't have to be, for a game that you're running.
Yeah, exactly. Like going just a smidgen over what would typically be like the norm of, say, a starter player or things like that. Because I feel like sometimes when players first come to the table or when they're first running a dungeon for the first time, it can be really daunting. And they're like, oh, well, what do I do? How do I act? Like, what's my next step? Or should I put on voices? Should I do like a whole terrain map and have everything all laid out? Like, what's the level of detail that I need to bring to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, to me, it's the one situation in the game where you can really call upon an eclectic skill set.
Mm-hmm.
Something that may not normally be related to RPGs. If you're really good at crocheting, or if you're really good at drawing symbols, or just any other obscure thing that may or may not have a good, solid, well, obviously, improvisation or, creative writing. These things are like direct skill sets. And these are kind of like an off-direct skill set. And it's kind of the one opportunity that you have to bring that into DMing.
Yeah, exactly. There are like things that you can do that like nobody would ever expect to be in a game, but like if you do them, it like adds such an extra little like deep touch to that game, where you can kind of push something a little bit further than maybe you would be able to otherwise. Like Jeremy said, things like crocheting or making props or like singing a song or saying something in a different language, like these little things that you can learn that nobody would ever like expect you to do those things, and nobody would judge you for not doing them. Like it'd be totally reasonable not to do them, but by doing them anyways, you can really add like a nice touch to the game that would otherwise not be there, and you can kind of enhance like the feel of the game and like really pull like further into the world than you might otherwise be able to.
Yeah. I think it's like, you take somebody brand new who's never played tabletop before, right? And then giving them the opportunity to say, okay, well, what is your creative outlet? Like, what do you enjoy? What is the thing that like makes you tick when you really go to play games? Well, like I come from an acting background. So the first time I ever got asked to play tabletop, it was like instantaneously, oh, I get to play a character? Oh, I get to choose like what voice I do or what mannerisms I have? Oh, dude, yeah, 100%, I'm into that. But like my home group, we don't play predominantly with props or things like that because I was never introduced to that. but I still think that that's a super cool thing. And those groups that do it, I mean, I'm blown away by the crafting work that I've seen throughout, like, all the groups that I'm in and everything. I can't even, like, imagine how much time it takes to create, like, that whole cityscape or something like that, where you're playing with the minis and doing all that kind of stuff. It just blows my mind.
A lot of it is a slow collection. You kind of build it up over time. Sometimes. Other times it's a mad dash to get it finished so you can put it on the table and you hope that the paint's not still wet.
Exactly, yeah, but like I mean, like, I think each person brings to the table their own, like, play style, right? And once you find a group that fits your play style, it seems so much easier for you to sort of fall into line and kind of realize what you can do to create that, like, next step of that next level play, basically. Of, like, man, I'm not that good at X, Y, and Z, but I'm really good at, like, A, you know? And I can do this super well. So I'm going to bring to the table this thing. That, to me, like, would mean more to me as a DM. It says, oh, you know what? That's your strength as a player. I'm going to make that really important going forward so that your experience at the table is enriched. Instead of you, like, going, D&D is not for me anymore, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, like, at least this is a trend that I usually see it, and you guys can feel free to agree or disagree. But basically, like, when somebody first comes into the hobby, it's very much of, like, they try to put a lot of detail, but it's often, like, detail put into the wrong places. So they'll spend, like, hours and hours and hours trying to make a character or, like, create a session, and they'll have, like, incredibly detailed prep notes that they end up, like, throwing 95% of it out anyways, and it's like... And then you kind of see this curve downwards as, like, as they get more experience, they kind of learn how to lean out the game a little bit, only down to kind of its essential elements. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people just kind of hover there, where there's a lot of room to kind of take that time that you were spending doing things that weren't helpful to the game, that you've cut out, and figure out, okay, so how can I use that time more wisely now to really kind of push this further? As you kind of start getting more comfortable with the game, then you kind of open up this time and this energy to start putting in other things like crafting terrain or doing voices or songs or things like that. And I think kind of there's a lot of people kind of get stuck in that downward trough part where they've cut out, like, the excess that they don't need as, like, a young player. They don't necessarily know what to do to replace that. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to continue to push your game forward.
Yeah, like, I'll totally agree with that. Like, I feel like that for me, I mean, I guess how do you guys want to do this? Like, do you want to talk about, like, first experiences going into D&D and how you guys sort of, like, came up with the way that you now approach D&D? And
yeah, I've got one thing that I want to add before we move on to that, though, is just that it kind of dawned on me as we were talking back and forth that really what we're talking about is a way for you to kind of find an avenue for you to inject further passion into what you're doing, into your games. Because ultimately what really is contagious, and we've talked about this before at the table, is positive, just any energy. And so if you are able to bring more passion to your table, then you're increasing the amount of energy at the table. And that immediately increases more immersion.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Like, I love when I can get drastically immersed into a campaign or a game or a character. If a DM gives me a leeway to, like, fully dive in to being a character or to doing something, like, I'm 100% on board with that. And it's like my full goal in life to make a better character or make a better event or a moment, right? Not necessarily for myself either, like opening up avenues for other players too, because I think it's not only about, you know, building the DM or the dungeon experience, God, I can't even think of words, tabletop experience for, the tabletop experience on a DM or a player standpoint, but it's about like building an entire group aspect in terms of that. So I think when you kind of get a group that you kind of mesh with really well, it makes it so easy for you to fall in line and sort of find that little niche that really makes everything work. Because then you can play off of their strengths and they can play off of yours, and you just make a wonderful, wonderful game that's like super memorable.
Yeah. And, kind of throwing back to our first episode, you're able to, or I guess it was only our second episode, regardless. You're able to drop your inhibitions whenever the fear of judgment goes away. It's a lot easier to step out of your shell whenever you look around the room or the virtual table or what have you. And you're like, okay, like what that guy over there said was 10 times worse than anything I could say. And I still loved it. So I'm going to go for it. It gives you a lot of courage.
Yeah, so I guess kind of trying to get an idea of kind of what we're talking about here, I think it'd be nice for us to kind of maybe give a couple examples of like situations where you've seen either yourself or other people like really push like the extra mile, and like as far as doing something that they didn't have to do but they did anyways, and it made the session so much better. So I have something that immediately comes to mind for me, but how about you guys? Do you have any examples that you want to share of like a GM who did something awesome or a player who really went over the top in a certain scenario?
Yeah. So I had been playing D&D for about 6 years. No, I guess it was probably about 4 years. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but we played like twice a year. And it was only for one night each time. So there wasn't a lot of investment, but I still had a really good time. I really enjoyed it. Anyways, I started playing in college when I went to school for theater arts, and the group that we formed was all drama students. It was all either people who were on the tech side or on the acting side. And the guy that was running it was a very eccentric young man who was a really good friend of mine at the time, named Rusty. And he was the first time I'd ever seen anybody do voices, things like that. And it really just kind of changed the way I looked at the game a lot. And one of the first times, one of the best examples at least that I can think of, is there was a lick. And we were fighting this lick in a graveyard. And when we came around the corner, the lick was sitting on a tombstone, just kind of waiting for us. And he was juggling skulls. And so we had this kind of very antagonistic standoff where we were bantering back and forth. So you know how it goes. Anyways. But he actually sat on the back of his chair and pretended like he was juggling something and did this voice, and he just changed the way he acted the scene. And it just blew me away because I'd never seen anybody do it before. So that's my example.
I feel like for me, something that like sparks my memory, first time I'd ever really played D&D was with Matt, and Matt was my first DM. Matt Click from A Fistful of Dice. He was my very first DM.
Spoiled little bitch.
I know. I am such a spoiled little bitch. I can't help it, man. I can't help it. It's something that I just lucked out with.
Yeah, man, you're good.
But no. The thing is, Matt kind of introduced me to D&D, and he said, hey, we're kind of getting some people together, and we're gonna kind of have some game nights. Would you want to come? And of course, I'm like, yeah, I'm down, because if it's the way he explained it was like, we've played on Neverwinter Nights at the time. We'd played through Baldur's Gate and a couple other things, and he's like, if you like RPGs, this is just tabletop, and you'll be able to do this kind of cool stuff. And I said, okay, cool, I'm down. I go, and the first time I'm there, I'm super nervous, but Matt made me feel super comfortable in less than 5 minutes, because immediately it was like, cool, you're going to create a character. And then once you create the character, you have full reign to do whatever you want. He was the first example of, like, delivering a story to me and delivering characters, because he would do voices for the characters. He would do, like, he would draw out the maps on the those Chessex tabletop maps at the time, or on a whiteboard or something, and he would go the extra mile to, like, make sure that you felt your character in a sense that wasn't just a piece of paper or whatever. So he would make those moments for you in that game. And I guess from that point on, I was like, oh, I'm so driven to continually play D&D, because if D&D is like this, if tabletop games are like this, then, oh man, I don't want to play anything else. Like, why am I playing video games if I get more reward out of playing a tabletop session like this? This means something so much more to me. And from now on, I carried that through all of my characters. I carried that through being a DM. And it was just a really fulfilling way for me to continue to play. Because I can still remember the first session and the first places we used to go to. And that whole world, I can't even remember the name now, but I know it was like this desert,
well, it's
funky world.
That's the magic one of what we do. You know, that's
awesome things that, like, you hold in your heart, and you're like, dude, I want that forever.
Yes, you were transported. That's the magic of a game like this. Whenever it goes well, whenever it clicks, is that you feel like a really good book, you know, or a really good movie. It stops being pretend for just a moment, you know, and that's those little moments that you chase through years of playing. And then you talk about them for years afterwards.
Yeah, so I guess just to give mine before we get too much further, this is actually something that happened recently, and I've talked about this game on the podcast at least once. Really good game. I'd highly encourage people to check it out. Lionel's Middle Earth campaign that he's running on his channel, Two Guys Tea in D&D, that I'm in. So we had a session basically where one of the characters, I should say, had died in the previous session, and we were basically having like a funeral session. So it was already like a pretty heavy session, you know. There was already moods and a pretty strong emotion to it. And we were kind of getting to the point where we were actually performing like the funeral ceremony for one of the characters. And, you know, one of the characters already kind of said their piece, and then I went up and kind of said my own thing. And then the character that Taylor in that campaign was playing, I don't know if she wrote it or if she grabbed it from Middle Earth text, but she sang like a Rohirrim funeral song for the character. And like she actually sang it like as the player. She sung the song in the game. She didn't say my character sings the song or these are the words. She actually took the time to learn the melody, learn the words, and perform this song as part of the session. And like I remember hearing it, and it was just like immediately, like I was already invested in the game and immersed in the game, but right there it was like 10 times more right off the bat. Like just from that like 30 seconds of singing, like it just totally made the game feel so much more real. Like you were just saying, Jeremy, it feels like just for that little bit you're a part of something in the world rather than observing it from the outside. It was like a really powerful moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like I don't enjoy singing publicly, but I'm not very good at it, so that makes a big difference. But I love finding things like that with characters and being able to bring them to the table as a player. Obviously, as a DM, it's something that is really rewarding. But as a player, it's just a little more precise, I guess. There's a little less required. So you can find like 2 beats or 3 beats or whatever, and kind of hang on to those as like character focuses. Whereas with a DM, you have to do so many of those a week or a month. So I think it's really nice to see people do it on both sides of the table. It's just a lot of when they do it, then you feel compelled to go the extra mile as well. Again, it's a contagious kind of thing. You want to give just as good as you're receiving. Most people.
Absolutely, it's incredibly contagious. Like seeing her sing that song in that game, like I have now tried to do stuff like that in my games, like when it's reasonable and like when it makes sense to do so. Like now I want to do those things because I've seen that and it's like, whoa, that was so cool. Like if I can provide that level, even try to get to that level of coolness, like, and if it gets to the point where suddenly like everybody at the table is doing these super cool things all the time, and it just like builds this huge upwards feedback loop. One person sings a song, then the next person writes a poem, then the next person builds a prop, and then suddenly it's just like you build this entire feeling of the table that comes along with all these people learning and doing all these things, and it makes the game like just skyrocket even further up.
Oh heck yeah. Like one of my favorite games that I've ever played in, and I'll just give one quick example to it, is the Ironhead game that Marquise ran. And Ironhead is our buddy Mike Lasham's setting, obviously. And I loved that game so much, but I think one of the things that I love about that game is also the way that like Marquise ran the setting, because he made the setting feel alive, and he made it feel good enough to where I felt immersed within it. I also like, you know, speaking of like what you were saying, Jeff, about like when somebody does something that makes you feel like, wow, I need to step my game up and do stuff. I think the thing that I look at like Mike for, and I look at Marquise for, is their effortless sort of description of and narrative flow of things, you know, and that to me was something that like, I'm gonna pull off of that. That was one of the most emotional games I've ever played, because my character, like, spoiler alert, my character died, but it was the most emotional game I've ever, like, one of the most emotional games I've ever played, because of the way that like the whole setting and however all the players sort of played off of that moment. I didn't know that was going to happen. But because everybody else played off of it so well, and it increased one after the other, like, it made that moment so much more special for all of us at the end, I think. So I completely agree with, like, your statement of, you know, when somebody does something cool, it makes you want to step up and do something even, like, not necessarily even cooler, but, like, complement that.
Yeah. It's one of those kinds of things where it becomes fun to learn a new thing, to research how to do something whenever you get curious about it and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to try that. Especially when you find something that feels like it fits with a character. You know, not that long ago I played in Drake's Moana-themed game. And I was playing a shark barbarian. A totem barbarian.
Oh, I still have not seen that game. I'm so excited to see that game, man. And I haven't had a chance to check it out. That's so good.
I went in, I was like, okay, cool. And I've always been in love with the idea of a haka. You know, the way that a lot of the Pacific Islanders, you know, especially like kind of New Zealand, do this intimidating like war dance before fighting. It's really intense. It's really spooky and bizarre, and it does a really good job of kind of setting you a little off. So I wanted to kind of capture that with my barbarian, as far as like when he went into rage. I wanted to do a haka, and I didn't want to just describe the way that it looked. So I actually wrote a haka for the character, and then performed it whenever he flew into rage. And it was nerve-wracking to do it, you know, live on the game, but it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. So, and I do it again in a heartbeat.
Dude, that's awesome, though. Like, I don't think I've ever gone that in detail of, like, I get that extra mile, like going and doing the research of like, oh man, for this particular setting, I'm going to do this thing or that thing. I don't think I've ever like gone that far, but now that you're saying that, now it makes me want to do more research for my characters and do more to like make them stand out in that aspect. I think that's beautiful, and I would totally do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that like it takes less work than people think that it would, and like so just you don't have to learn that much to be able to pull off something that's like pretty compelling in game. So kind of like my own example of that recently is I ran an Adventures in Middle Earth game for a couple of super awesome players. It's like about the fall of Arnor, like way back in the day. And it was the first session of that game. It's going to be a trilogy, theoretically, at least. Hopefully, we're going to be able to continue it. But like to start that session off, I sang like the song that like the king who like founded Arnor and Gondor, like sang this hymn about like about the lands that he was like now obtaining, and like basically swore this oath in song form that's like passed down throughout all the kings. And like that's how I opened up that session, is I sung that song in Elvish. It's just like that took me like 20 minutes. Like you just like here's the words in Elvish. You take a couple minutes to like watch the scene in the Lord of the Rings movie where Aragorn sings it. The melody is super easy. The words aren't that hard to pronounce. And suddenly 30 minutes later, you have like a super flavorful way to start the session off that can totally like ground people into like Middle Earth. It's like, if you can just take that extra 15, 20 minutes to do some research and some legwork, to like learn about guns if you're going to be like a gun mechanic in a setting, take 20 minutes to research how to fix a gun if it's jammed. If you're going to be a blacksmith, take 10 minutes to watch somebody forge a sword on YouTube or something. And like those little extra touches like really, really help. Like, and it doesn't take as much work as people, I think that it does. Like, they imagine you have to actually spend like 8 hours learning all these forging techniques. Like, you don't have to. Like, you can learn them you can learn basics pretty quickly, and basics are often enough.
For instance, like with taxes, I think people would be interested to know this because I play taxes in the Lore Keepers, which is Rob Coletta's setting, and Rob is so good at what he does in terms of making the world vibrant. So what I love doing for him is like I said when I sat down, I was like, I want to create a Dragonborn. But not only do I want to create a Dragonborn, I want to like make it so that like I have survivalist techniques and things like that. So when I went to design the character, I went into, okay, well, how does he hunt? Well, he's not going to be like a normal human character because obviously he's different. So I started looking into feral instincts of lizards and how like dinosaurs used to hunt and things like that, so that I could like figure out in my head how a Dragonborn might stalk its prey before it attacks, or how a humanoid creature would interact with humans versus just being like human to human interaction, because I don't think like the difference between like Dragonborn and just like a normal human, for instance, if I were to come at you and say, "Hi, my name is Taxes, how are you?" and sound something more like Beetlejuice out of like Michael Keaton from Beetlejuice, it wouldn't sound like nearly as impactful as adding that guttural growl or backwards sounding part, because it makes the vocals sound realistic, and it makes something impactful and memorable to people's ears. And I guess especially in this medium that we're working in, like, I think that that's something that definitely has to be shown, because it's not just an acting, because sometimes people aren't watching these things, they're listening to them, kind of like what they're doing with us. And we have to be mindful of how you're going to portray something so that it's not just, I walk into a dungeon, I light a torch, things like that. The more research you can do, the better. So I completely 100% agree with that.
Yeah, so you guys both just pointed out exactly what I was talking about. Like where you bring your own knowledge and skill sets and passion into the way you approach the game, because it's, your passion. Jeff, you talked about music, and Chad, you talked about voice acting. So both of you showed that it's where your mind goes to create better, create faster. So naturally, that's kind of that's the rhythm that you fall into whenever you're able to be a kid again, whenever you're able to just let go and be free. And, you're free of judgment, you're free of yourself in some ways, and you just get out of your own way, and then you give it your all.
Yeah, so like, Jeremy, I have a question for you then.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, since Jeff and I are kind of talking about like the things we're passionate about, I want to throw it to the table for you. When you go to the table to sort of like design a new setting or design a new, terrain map, whatever you're going to do, what's sort of your process in like figuring that out? Like, what am I going to present versus what am I going to kind of hide away? Like, what are the big things that I need to like actually build and design versus like, what do I need to not worry about because it's all going to happen in RP?
Well, it depends on whether I'm talking about playing online or whether I'm talking about playing with like my main home group. Which it sounds like you're more talking about like with my main home group.
Well, yeah, because I know that you're big into the terrain, like crafting and creating stuff, and so I kind of want to hear that, and then also if you want to talk about like how you do stuff for online, because I feel like one of the things that I think is a really strong strength for you that I've seen as far as your online stuff is, dude, you build worlds really, really well. Like you paint pictures really well as far as listening to things. Like I can visualize your world in like a very compact area, because I know you only have a certain amount of time as a DM to express that, and you're really good at taking that compact time and specializing it in, this is this thing, you're in this area, how do you react? Right.
Okay, so I guess I'll talk about the terrain aspect of it first. And it kind of, I guess, touches on both. Like whenever I start doing a setting, and I keep going back to this one as an example, but White Lotus Black Jade was a campaign that I ran last year for my home group, and before I decided to run that game, I didn't know a whole lot about Eastern cinema, about wuxia and kung fu art and things like that. Like I knew a little, just growing up in America, but I'm not a huge fan of anime, and which is a big surprise to a lot of people, and it makes kind of people upset, but it's just never really been something that's appealed to me overly large. But I don't know, I never really picked up on Eastern storytelling very much. Anyways, whenever I decided that I was going to run White Lotus Black Jade as an Oriental adventure set in my homebrew world, because one of my players is a really big Japanophile, who really, really likes Japanese culture. He spent a year there studying abroad, things. And we're always playing the medieval Europe. So I was like, well, I'll, do this campaign to kind of, give him something that's more up his alley. So I spent the next, this is a freakish amount of time, but I spent the next 8 months immersing myself in Chinese and Japanese movies, just where I could find them. And Netflix, thankfully, has a ton of them. And I got a really good audiobook from a suggestion from Chris Wilhelm that I listened to. I think there's 4 books, and I listened to 3 of them. They were just a really good story. Kind of an example of interjecting Asian culture with fantasy. Anyways, so, and then I started on the stuff that I knew that I wanted to make physically, to craft as far as terrain and stuff. So I had a lot of time to kind of work on it here and there. And it's honestly, it's just kind of the same thing. It's about what you like spending your time doing. And, spending my time painting and crafting is something that I really, really enjoy doing. It's very therapeutic and cathartic for me. So I'm able to put in a lot of time. So yeah, I guess talk about that for a minute before I move on to the other question, or I could just roll.
Yeah, I mean, I guess something that comes to mind here that I think is really important, something to kind of take from all this that I think Jeremy's kind of touched on a little bit of, it's just like, we all just named different ways that we like use to really enhance a game or that we've seen, and every single one of them has been different from the other. So I think what's important to note here, I think, and this is just like a kind of a human thing in addition to an RPG thing, like a lot of people think that like making something better is like a linear path. Like, if you want your game to be better, you must include this, then this, and this, and this, more or less in that order. I think what kind of we've helped to show so far, and something that I truly believe, is that like there's a million different pathways that you can take to making a game really special. So, like, for example, like Jeremy has terrain, and he makes really awesome terrain. If you haven't seen any that he's posted, check it out. It's really cool. I don't do terrain, and it's not interesting to me. I like looking at other people's terrain, but I don't craft terrain. But, I can write a song, and Chad can do an awesome voice. And it's like, if you see somebody do something super cool in a game that really adds a lot of flavor, try not to get into the trap of like, well, I can't sing, so I can't do that. Like, you don't have to sing, but you could do something. There's something that that other people don't, that you're able to add to a game to make it really special. It's like, don't get caught up in trying to like copycat other people's things, unless you really, really want to. Like, if you want to learn how to craft terrain, absolutely start practicing and make that a thing. But if you don't want to, you don't have to include terrain if you don't want to, because you can include the 999,000 other options for cool things that you can do. So it really is a matter of kind of like what Jeremy's touched on, following your passion and following your interests. I think like to kind of illustrate this, like I think one of my favorite GMs to play with that I don't think gets a whole lot of credit in the community is Nick Dawson. I don't know how much either of you guys have had to play
Nick
with
Dawson
him or under him, but
deserves so much credit, and yet he doesn't record his games. I'm sorry, but like Nico, come on, man, I love you.
What I kind of want to highlight, like, he doesn't sing songs or things like that, but like he has a way, like he's super passionate about like the settings that he runs, so he can put in those tiny little cultural details. He can tell you exactly how like a Roman court legal scenario might play out, and like the legal and moral ramifications within that culture of like how that would actually interact, or Norse culture. And he can tell you, well, this would be considered breaking an oath, but this wouldn't, and here's like legal reasons why, and here's how their morality fits into it. And it's like, that's totally different than crafting terrain or singing a song, but it's still more. It's still extra. And like those little things that he can drop are going to make the setting feel way more alive. And it's like, you don't have to do that if that's not your thing. But if you can sing a song, or you can make terrain, or you can do a voice, like all of these things contribute. So you don't stress about if you don't do X or if you don't do Y. Focus on your Z, the thing that you do that other people don't do, and bring that to the forefront.
Yeah, like, don't be nervous to be like, well, I can't do voices. Like, I've seen a lot of people get intimidated when they see, like, one of the things that I've noticed in the group, and maybe it's just Absolute Tabletop, maybe whatever, but I've seen sometimes people get intimidated when they look at the group that they're going to be hanging out with, they're going to be running a game with, and they're like, oh man, that guy's like super good at this thing, and that girl's like super good at that thing, and oh man, I don't know if I'm at the same caliber or at the same level as they are. How do I contribute? And again, I think, Jeff, you made a really good point. It's not a matter of like, can you do X and Y? It's like, what's your Z? What is the thing that makes you able to contribute to make this a really special moment? And if you can find that thing, that makes this moment really special for not only you and makes you want to enjoy this game more, but the other people are going to remember that moment, then you've just like shattered all of the misconceptions of like why people are shy at the table and why people are like scared to join games or want to join games but don't know how to. I think that that's one of the things that people get so intimidated by is I don't have a cool thing. You do, you just don't know what it is yet. So look for it in other people.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. It's about keeping your eyes open and watching other people's games, playing with a lot of other people. That's why it's so important to play with more than just your usual group, because you'll discover things where you're like, oh, I had never thought of that. I never would have thought of putting that in the game, but I really like it. It moved me, it helped me immerse, and I think it's something that I can do. So that's where I'm going to put the next, focus of my attention, is learning how to do that thing. It's healthy.
Yeah, I always look at every time I look at my YouTube feed and I see all you guys, like I subscribe to like every channel, like I'm a subscription whore as far as I'm concerned with how many times I've subscribed to people. But my thing is I use YouTube as a means of discovering and learning and doing new stuff, and it makes me a stronger player and a stronger DM going forward. So maybe I'm not good at this, or maybe I'm not good at narrative description, or maybe I'm not good at, describing a setting, or this, that, and the other. I'll find a DM or I'll find a player who does that really, really well, and then I'll watch a bunch of their games, and then later on, I'm like, okay, cool. That playstyle is now going to become a part of, like, I call it my toolkit, right? And so if my toolkit is now filled with, like, that new thing, I don't have to be worried that, like, I can't just pull that out later on.
Yeah, I think you bring up, like, the way that you describe it there, I think is really effective, like, as a toolkit of, like, here are the range of things that I could put into a game if I wanted to. And like everybody's toolkit is going to be different from each other's, and that's important and good. And if you have something that you're interested in, you want to get better at, absolutely you can focus on that. But don't be afraid to also use your own tools that other people might not think of doing, because just as well as you can watch somebody else's game and learn something that they do, and you go, "Whoa, I want to do that." Like, you could have just as easily have your own thing that you would do that nobody else would do, and other people will see you and become inspired by that. Like, this kind of goes back to our like lowering your inhibitions of just like episode 2. I won't go too far into that because we already did that as an episode, but don't be afraid to take your thing and put it into the game. If you're a songwriter, write a song. If you're a terrain crafter, craft terrain. If you're a voice actor, do a like voice. And again, I said this I think I've said this in definitely last episode, and I might have said it in the first episode too. Like, if you're in a group where you try to do one of these things, you try to sing a song, you try to make awesome terrain, you try to do a super awesome voice, and people tell you that it's lame or stupid, or that people make you feel weird about it, like, just find a different group. Like, if you're trying to do these things that we've talked about and you get shut down for it, like, you're just at the wrong place. Like, there are too many good tables that you could be at who would embrace your awesome contributions to deal with people who don't want to deal with it.
I think that there's a fine line between, like, oh man, I have an embarrassing moment at a table, or I have an embarrassing line thing, this, that, and the other, versus, like, I'm making you feel bad about, like, not being... If you're in that kind of a toxic situation, then yeah, you shouldn't be a part of that group. You shouldn't be a part of that, like, playing area. And the thing is, as many people as I've seen play in this scenario, like, or in this group, I've not seen a single toxic player. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've never played with toxic people. Everybody's been so supportive and loving, and they're all about, like, what are you cool? What is your cool? I want that. you know, like come and enjoy and see what this cool thing is. Yeah, I could talk ad nauseum about like voice acting, and I know that Jeff could talk ad nauseum about like music, and obviously like Jeremy, you and I have like a bond in the theater background, right? And like I know that you and I could probably talk about that forever, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes you get caught up in I made a mistake or I did this thing. What do I do now? And I'll just come from it from a point of rejection. I get rejection all the time doing auditions. I'll tell you that if you feel like, oh man, I'm not doing something that's good enough, don't ever think that. Like, that's not what we're here for. We're here to have fun. We're here to enjoy. And if, like, somebody is telling you that that wasn't good enough, or that, man, why did you try that voice? That was horrible. Then that's not the kind of player you want to be around.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've said a million times, but, like, there's only one way to get good at things. It's to do them. You can research all you want. You can watch tutorials and watch videos and stuff all you want. But there's one thing that you can do that will... And that's the only thing you can do to guarantee getting to where you want to be, and that's to do it. Maybe the first time you do a voice, it's bad. You fall out of the voice, you mix your accents, it's all over the place, and it's just it doesn't go where you want it to go. Maybe the next game you fall out of the accent 4 times instead of 5, and then maybe the next game it's 3 times, and then the next game it's 2 times, and then like as you continue to do these things and work on them, you get better at it. You get to the point where you can do it consistently every single game. And I guarantee you, most of the people you see doing these things really well, like when you see Chad do a voice, it's not exactly his first time doing a voice. He's been doing voices forever. He does them in all of his games. And like if I sing, like it's not the first time that I've ever sung. Like I do this a lot. So it's like you can get to where you want it to be. So like, don't worry if the time that you try it first is like, oh man, that didn't really accomplish what I wanted it to. Next time, do it again, and you'll be better. And then the next time, you'll be better. And then the next time, you'll be better. And you just do that, and the next thing you know, you're one of those people in the community where you do that voice, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that guy's voices are so good. Yeah, because he's been doing it for 5 years. Like, there's a certain timeline that you have to follow with like learning some of these skills. So like don't be discouraged at first if you're not where you want them to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you can get them where you want them to be.
I 100% agree. Like, yeah, don't be discouraged. Like, it takes time. It takes practice. Little known fact real quick. When I go to the table to do any of my voices that you hear in any of the games that I'm in, I practice them in the mirror. Like, a day in advance, and like I do different monologues for different situations that might come up in a game, and sometimes they're horrible, and when I first come to the table I am shaking with nerves, so the first session of any game might be horrible for me, but keep going. It's gonna be okay, because the group around you should support you and keep moving forward and motivate you to keep doing better.
Well, and kind of to put, a little bit of a tag on the end of this, you don't have to set these kinds of goals for yourself. It's not essential to have these things. These are exactly what we're calling them. They're extras. It's the extra mile. It's the extra credit. It's not necessary to do it, and it's not necessary to do it to be a good player or a good GM. You can be a fantastic GM without having an extra mile, if you want to put it in quotations. But it is a good way, an easy way, when you can discover your passion for interjecting that extra mile into your game, because you're going to enjoy the time that you put in, that it takes to bring something like this to the table. And what it will do is it'll make this hobby rewarding in a completely new and totally unexpected fashion for you. And if it's something you already feel strongly about, and you find that you can tie it to RPGs, which you obviously already love, that's a great marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I think people underestimate how much of their like skills and interests in day-to-day life can be used in RPGs. Like, for example, if you're like a computer programmer and you're playing in a modern setting or a sci-fi setting where there is technology, like you're going to be able to describe so much more vividly like how to hack into a computer or how to write code than somebody who has no idea about that skill. And like just basically like anything that you do or anything that like there's room to include that in RPGs some way or somehow. You can make these things relevant, and you can add in that little bit of nuance and detail to your description that somebody else might not be able to do because they don't actually know that process as well as you do. And it's like it doesn't take a whole lot. Like if you're gonna write a song for a game, it doesn't have to be more than 10 seconds. Like you don't have to write a symphony. If you're trying to bring in your computer programming skills, you don't have to write an entire like suite of software for the game. You could just describe that little nuance to how you hack a computer that nobody else would have. Like there's so much power to those little things that people add. Those little bits of personality that only they can bring and that nobody else would be able to do. Like it really, you don't need much. Like I think people overestimate like how much work you have to do for these things, and you just really don't need too much for it to be amazing.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's becomes one of those things where you can put as much or as little in as you want or as feels right for you. A lot of people will talk about, oh, you really should be spending X amount of time prepping your sessions or doing things, and if you've spent this much time, then you've spent way too long. Or some people say no prep at all is best. It just kind of runs the gamut because guess what, we're all different. So we all need different things and different amounts of time to prep, and you've got to find kind of your like your zen, your RPG zen. It's about kind of what works for you, because whatever works for you is going to pull the best finalized product, if you will, out of your performance. So you've got to be happy and you've got to be passionate first in order to produce something that's energetic and contagious and entertaining.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree. And it's like it's something I think that like I mean I could do an entire like 3 podcasts about like advice and how you should take like any advice with a grain of salt, like based on your own style. But like what you said, I think is really important. Like for example, I grew up in a very much like an improvisational bent. I was a jazz musician. Like I loved improv, and I loved doing improvisational anything, music, like whatever, anything improv. I like to improv. So like my prep for a game is like, here's some names I might use, and here's a bullet point premise about maybe what the session is going to be generally about. And that's it. I have no other notes, nothing else at all. Whereas maybe if you're a creative writer and you're an author, you have a background as an author, maybe you can write out an amazing description that nobody else would be able to write because of your writing ability. So it's like, and so maybe you do more prep than I do because you like to write things out and you like to have notes and detailed descriptions that you can like speak because of your writing abilities that I don't have. So that's why I don't prep a lot, because I don't have the ability to write like maybe other people do. But I make it all up because that's what I'm good at. It's like you can just take your natural tendencies and your skills and form the game around that rather than trying to like copy other people, because you'll get way better games by doing it your way, what you're best at, than trying to copy other people in a way that doesn't suit your natural personality.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, like find that little niche. Like I'm kind of counterintuitive to you, Jeff. Even though I come from an improv background, it's like I have to sort of write my prep, and I kind of like bullet point list it out and all that kind of stuff. And I agree with you. I think it just depends on what your tendencies are and kind of what you're about. as to what you're going to use, but you know who you are, and it's all about building who you are as far as the tabletop person that you're going to be, or the tabletop player or GM. Once you learn that kind of learning curve, it'll be easy for you to just hop into a game and like know exactly what you want to do and what biggest skills you want to present to the table, you know?
Yeah, and I think kind of an important note to make too is that, like, you know, we've kind of gone on and on a lot about like things that we already have a lot of like pre-established passions that we bring in. You know, I was a musician before I played tabletop games, and Chad, I'm not sure if you were a voice actor first, but I would guess that you already had that passion.
I had so I guess for me, my background comes from, I started doing acting as far as school, theater performances and stuff at an early age.
You had like theater background going into tabletop RPGs, but I think like one of the potential responses I could see to like an episode like this is like, well, I don't have one of those. I didn't learn music or acting growing up, but like I want to, like, so what do I do? Like, if I don't have like my passion, like what do I do? I think the honest answer is like, don't be afraid to try things out. It's like you only have to do it once before you kind of know. So if you think like, oh, well, maybe I would like to try to write a song for my game, and then you do it for a game and you're just like, you know, I didn't really like that. Never have to do that again. Like, don't be afraid to try different things and test it out. Like, that's one of my big things that I always try to advocate in the tabletop RPG is like, always be experimenting. Always be trying something new, because it might catch on and you might love it. So don't be afraid to like dive in just a little bit. Like, if you're going to run a game about, you know, computer hacking, watch a couple videos about hacking. And if you don't like it, you never have to do it again. And then you can try, maybe the next session you try singing, or then maybe the next session after that you try doing a voice or whatever. Like, I think people like have this fear that like if they're not amazing at it, then they won't be able to do it in the game in a way that works. I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. Like, if you don't have something that you're like, yes, this is what I would bring to a game, start trying different things out. Like, you'll find something that connects with you, and you'll find something that resonates, and then you can build off that once you find it. I think everybody kind of has these things in them somewhere. It's just a matter of digging it out and like putting it to work.
Yeah, absolutely. In the process, you oftentimes will find out interesting hobbies, you know, that you never would have thought were something that you were into, even apart from RPGs. You know, if you find a way to tie it to RPGs, and that's, you know, even better. But you may just find that you like doing something that's completely different, and you just, you know, or learn something. You know, there's a great joy in learning new things. I wish I had discovered it while I was still in school, because, you know, as an adult, I've found that I'm much more open to learning things that I'm interested in. But, you know, one of the things that I kind of wanted to point out earlier, and it kind of, for me at least, it kind of draws all of this up with a bow, is I took an anthropology course in college that was really, really intriguing. Very, very cool stuff. And there was a local Hindu temple close to where I was going to school. And I had heard of Hinduism, and I'd heard a couple of things here and there, but being an American, you know, male raised in the South, it's not exactly something I was exposed to a lot. So we went, and I was really excited, and kind of took the tour. And the thing that stuck out to me the most is this one thing that I didn't know about the Hindu religion. And they believe that there are many paths up the mountain to finding enlightenment, in that no two paths are the same, but all of them are still correct. They all still lead to the same place. It's just about how you get there. And that path is something for you to discover and to follow. And they believe that their structure, their religion, is only one of those paths. So even people who don't follow their particular form of religion, they don't view as being wrong. It's just a different path up the mountain. And I think that's a really healthy way to look at not only life in general in a lot of ways, but specifically to this topic, it has a pretty direct correlation. None of these things are wrong or bad or what have you. They all lead to the pinnacle. And the pinnacle is not necessarily to be a better player. It's that you're enjoying the game more. Because when you enjoy the game more, guess what happens? You end up being a better player. It's just a by-proxy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you said it really well just there. So, I think we're kind of doing a good bit of time here. So I think we should probably start looking to maybe start to move things in the closing direction here. But I will just kind of say, open up maybe perhaps last thoughts. I know, Jeremy, you kind of wrapped up what you were saying there really well. So if you have something else, then you can do that. Otherwise, that can kind of be your last thought. But I guess I'll just go while I'm talking already. So for me, it's a matter of I think a lot of people try to separate their RPG life, so to speak, from the rest of their life. And I think part of that is there's a lot in RPG that's kind of built of acceptance and pop culture. It's becoming more and more accepted now than it ever has been. But there's still, I think, a lot of tendency to be well, that's just something else that I do that's not a part of this other part of me that maybe is the social person. There's a lot that you can learn by integrating the different pieces of yourself into one. So you can use RPGs as a way to explore other interests that you might have. If you love alchemy or ancient Egypt or music, you can use an RPG as a vessel to explore that. You can also use RPGs as a vessel to integrate parts of that into other parts of your life. I can definitively say that I'm a better, more well-rounded person now that I've been playing RPGs than I was before because of things I've taken from RPGs and put into my own life. For example, I've now become very interested in acting and storytelling, and I've started to take acting classes and singing classes because of my experiences in RPGs. And you can take pieces of you and put it into RPGs, and you can take pieces of RPGs and take them out and put them back into you. And you can kind of create this wonderful creative feedback loop of improvement and furthering your interests and furthering yourself and furthering your life. To get deep with it, if you can pardon me doing so. There's so much room to
dude,
expand your
worry
knowledge.
about that. That's awesome. That is amazing.
Yeah, there's so much room to expand yourself into RPGs and expand RPGs further into yourself. And by trying to integrate those things together into a unit rather than separate them and categorize them into boxes, you make all of those things better. You make your RPGs better, you make yourself better, and just it creates this, at least for me and my experiences, this awesome cycle of furthering, of getting better, of becoming more enjoying the different things that all of those activities have to offer because of the connections that I've made between them. That's my little last thing there. How about you, Chad? Any last important thoughts?
Yeah, man. Okay. So, God, you guys are so good. I am so blessed to be a part of this little group because both of you just killed it, and I feel see, this is what we're talking about, that. Oh man, you guys did so good. What do I gotta do now?
Speak from the heart, man.
Exactly. But it's one of those things where I think. Let's talk about I'll take a moment to talk about my personal background and my personal journey just a little bit. So obviously, it's no secret that I've had acting background and stuff at this point in terms of the group and whatever. But I think that coming out of it when I was a teenager, I was so scared to get back into this realm of acting and doing voiceover and other things like that. I didn't think that I could do that, and I stopped believing in myself, and then when RPGs and like tabletop were introduced back into my life, it gave me an outlet to really explore that passion and really explore that genre again. And so every time somebody comes to the mic and says, hey, I want you to be a part of my game, I jump at the chance to do it, because this gives me an opportunity to explore a new character, explore a new thing, explore a new gaming style that I've never done before, this, that, and the other. And it really got me out of my sense of fear that I had with public speaking and with, you know, presenting myself as a character, or the fear of rejection, like, man, people might not like this. I've stopped caring about whether people like this or not. I think that that's something that you have to do. You mentally have to, like, take it and stop blocking yourself from caring, because really the people that you're doing it for are the 4 or 5 people in one session that you're doing it for. You're doing it for friends. You're doing it for people who have the same passions as you. And you have to sort of like realize and mold yourself to realizing that, like, they're not going to reject you. They're not going to say to you that that was horrible, because at the end of the day, like, they're going to embrace you. They're going to take what you love. Like, for me, it's voice acting. I have seen so many people take on that I'm going to do a voice in this, that, and the other, or I'm going to do a voice in my game, or I'm going to do this, that, and the other now because I've seen other people do it, or people who have actually come up to me and like messaged me and said, oh, because you did that awesome voice, now I'm actually interested in doing voiceover now. How do I get involved in doing voiceover or doing this, that, and the other? I would have never had that reaction 2 or 3 years ago. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you allow that fear to consume you and you don't take the effort to push yourself forward past it, then you're not going to get an opportunity to really explore those passions you have. So expand on your passions through something as loving and as caring and as embracing, I think, as RPGs, because you will find an RPG that you love. There are some people out there that love Fate. There are some people out there who love Fiasco, and some people who love D&D. You will find a group or a style that you love, and you'll latch onto it, and you'll be able to create more than you ever have. And I wholeheartedly believe in that system, because I would not be doing what I'm doing now with voiceover if I didn't take the leap to do RPGs and play through YouTube and like meet so many amazing people through this process. I wouldn't be doing that now if it weren't for the people I've met and the creative, like, again, like you said, Jeff, it's like creative feedback loop, right? Other people being creative and other people continually doing that inspires you to keep going and keep pushing, even if you think you're not there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think you completely nailed it. Like, and I can honestly say, if I can dare be a little sappy for a moment, but it is people like you, Chad, and Jeremy, and also people like Rob Coletta, and like people like that I've seen in this community. Like, I'm learning acting right now because of you, and because of you being both Chad and Jeremy, and because of Rob and people like that who are amazing at it, and I've seen them do it, and I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I want to do that. It's like, I wouldn't be learning those things if people in the community weren't so passionate about them and so forthcoming with their abilities and their knowledge about it. Like, I can honestly say that, like, I'm learning things that I've wanted to learn but was scared to, because I've seen people in the community just be out there with it and do it.
I think the really cool thing about this community that I love so much is that, like, everybody's embracing. And I could be an asshole, right? I could be a complete asshole and be like, wait, you want to learn what I know? oh no, but that takes away from my bread and butter. That takes away from me. No, I don't want to teach you that. I don't want to teach you this lesson, or I don't want to teach you this thing. I could be that kind of guy. But at the end of the day, what is that helping me do if I don't take the knowledge that I have and teach it to someone else, or give it to someone else and say, like, look, here's what I did, or here's what I can do. Here's how we can make this better together. Here's how we can make this whole experience so much more fulfilling, you know. And I'd rather teach what I know, and vice versa. You teach what you know to me, and what Jeremy knows to me. And I think group collective creativity is so much stronger than you trying to develop it yourself. You know, if you let yourself kind of sit in a wormhole of, I'm only going to learn from me, and I'm only going to learn what I want, you're never going to expand, and it's never going to blossom further. You're going to just sit in like a capsule of revolving repetitive thought. You're never going to get other new experiences, and that's what RPGs and D&D does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, there's the famous saying, like, rising tide lifts all ships, except like in communities like AbTab and these ones, like everyone is both the tide and the ship. Like, your tide is lifting someone else's ship and vice versa. And like, we can build each other's skills up and learn from each other in a way that I think is pretty incredible. But I think final thoughts, Jeremy, if you have anything that you would like to add after all that.
Yeah. Yeah, just kind of what you guys are talking about, just paying it forward. One of the things that I've learned to enjoy as a part of the hobby over the last, however long, 20, 23 years or whatever that I've played, is to find enjoyment of seeing the light bulb in somebody's face when they get it. Not when they get the way the combat system works, or when they get, the reference or the in-joke that you've made, but when they understand what this hobby is really capable of. When the blinders have been taken off and they're like, oh, now I understand why you have spent so much time playing this game. Now I understand. And when you see that connection that you get with somebody, and they're like, that aha moment, that is something that is a treat, and to enjoy. And so for me, that reward is completely and totally worth teaching someone, taking the time to tell them not only how you're arriving at this particular mechanical choice or whatever, but teaching them how to play the game, so that whenever they go off on their own and play with their friends or family or what have you, that they bring as much passion to it as you did, showing them how to play the game. So, like, I thoroughly have enjoyed passing on any information that I have learned from the other people that I've been paying attention to or playing with. Because I feel like the information and the knowledge isn't mine. It's not mine to own. It's not mine to sequester. I should be paying it forward. So, yeah. But that's, I think that's about all that we can probably say on going the extra mile. Unless we go an extra mile and a half.
Yeah, let's go the extra mile on the Extra Mile podcast episode. And I think for us, honestly, going the extra mile is stopping now instead of talking for another hour.
Yeah,
so I think that's our extra mile for this episode, is actually stopping at a reasonable time frame and shutting up for once in our goddamn lives.
I know, because we could sit here and talk for hours about it. Yeah, and that's something that I love about you guys, and I'm super excited to continue doing this with you guys. But this just feels good, man. This feels so good. It feels like I am so happy.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been, yeah. This has been the Dudes of Yore. I'm Jeff, joined by Jeremy Lilley here as well, and by our brand new member, Chad Knick. Great to have him along here. Chad Knick.
You're so amazing.
Yeah. So part of our little tradition that we've started, part of our little tradition we started here, Chad, that you might know if you actually listen to the ends of the episodes, is that instead of having one single snappy sign off, we always say we take turns improving a snappy sign off. So this is episode 3. I've already done one, and Jeremy has already done one.
Yeah,
so everybody drum roll. So Chad's gonna improv a snappy ending here for us.
It's Chad.
Son of a bitch! What? I have to improv a sign off? Oh, okay.
Snappy sign off for the podcast.
Right,
here it goes.
Take your time.
What do I want to do? I could. Let's see. Since we're talking about what we're passionate about, I think that it is only fitting that my ending be a voice of some kind, right? We're talking about that. So I'll end with Alan Rickman, right? What would you guys like for Alan Rickman to say?
You're improving the snappy sign off here.
That's all you, brother.
Don't try to push. Fine. Don't try to put this on us.
I'm pushing it back on you guys because I'm nervous.
All right, fine. I guess I will start by saying that I truly love the Dudes of Yore. Love is a difficult sort of emotion for me to express, obviously. But this has been a rather enjoyable conversation, and I look forward to continuing it in the future. This has been Dudes of Yore. Congratulations. Goodbye.
Oh my god, I am dying. I've heard a lot of impressions, but I don't think I've ever heard Alan Rickman, and that was the best Alan Rickman that I've ever heard.
With any luck, something about what you've just listened to is both informative and entertaining. Be sure, if you're interested, to get in touch with us. You can find Jeremy Lilley on his YouTube channel, The Erasmus Expeditions. Jeff Doty can be found on his YouTube channel, Encounterbalance. And Chad Knick can be found on his YouTube channel, currently under his name. I guess that about wraps it. Huh? Oh, right. This is but one of many grand tales, traveler. The coin in the hat is much appreciated. We will return with further stories and advice for your listening pleasure. So be sure to return when you pass through here again, and the road has worn you down. The next round is on us.